So hi everyone. Today I'm going to be doing another reaction video. It's of Graham Linehan's now notorious appearance on Newsnight to discuss why he is against rights for trans people. So yeah, without further ado, I will play this and I'll share my thoughts with you on it.
Well, Graham Linehan is with me now. You wrote a piece in the papers at the weekend. You say you've been vilified on social media and that you've even lost work as a result of speaking out in this trans debate. Why have you got yourself mired in this? You're not a trans person, you're not a woman. Why have you made this your issue?
Well, the main reason is that women can't speak about this. Women like... I'll admit, I'm not a great person to be in this conversation. I'm a comedy writer, and I am very blunt. But the thing is, there's a lot of women, like Kathleen Stock, Jane Clare Jones, academics, who are very compassionate, but they protect their boundaries and the boundaries of young lesbians and women in general. And they do so in a very respectful, quiet way. But whenever they're asked to speak, there's protests, they get shut down. Kathleen Stock had a freedom of information request about her emails. You know, it's insane, the abuse and harassment they face. So I thought I'd step in. And you know, I don't have a boss as such.
Yeah, but has stepping in made the debate any better? I mean, a lot of people say that the language you've used, some of...
So Graham Linehan, he's, for anybody who doesn't know, he is a scriptwriter, and he wrote Father Ted and The It Crowd as well, which actually contains an episode about a trans woman, which a lot of people found offensive, and that has since been kind of taken off a lot of you know, kind of re-showings of the It Crowd. He talks here about women not being allowed to speak up on this. Actually, women do speak up on this. A lot of gender critical women speak up on this, you know, or TERFs as I would call them. Well, actually, no, because maybe trans exclusionary radical feminist is kind of a misnomer for them, really, because they're basically transphobic. And feminism isn't transphobic, and feminism isn't feminism if it excludes a group of women for any reason, and excluding women because they are trans, it isn't feminist in my opinion. But hey, anyway, Graham Linehan is, he's kind of like inserted himself into this sort of kind of backlash against trans rights at the moment, and he's a transphobic male who is actually trying now to pass off his transphobia as feminism, to give it like a veneer, because he thinks it'll give it a veneer of respectability, but no, I mean, as I've said, these people, these kind of like gender critical people, they're actually just a tiny minority of people in the UK, and then they're mostly in the privileged establishment, in the media and academic establishment. I mean, in the UK, some professions are actually closed to trans people, not kind of explicitly, you know, there's no actual law barring us from becoming journalists or politicians, or, you know, or you know, in certain parts of academia. But we do know you won't find trans people in a lot of professions, because we know that in those professions we will not be welcome, and we won't get promoted anyway, because these people are at the top and they won't let us in. So basically, Graham has inserted himself into this, and you know, he's kind of trying to pass off his old-fashioned hatred of trans women and insecurity about women, some women and girls being trans, as feminism. So yeah.
Of the dismissive terms that you've bandied about have actually increased the toxicity of this debate.
Can you give me an example?
Yes, you can. Yeah, I'll give you several if you want. So, what about comparing people in the trans debate to speaking out against Nazis? I mean, that's pretty extreme.
Yeah, well, this is the part as a Jewish trans person that actually really got to me the most, where Graham Linehan makes a comparison between himself. I mean, he's done it before, not only on this program, but he's also said stuff like people who are speaking out against trans rights are the new French resistance and stuff like that. You know, he said stuff like similar to that. You know, he's kind of compared himself to the French resistance, I mean, this is like that's like an insult to all the people who fought the Nazis during World War II and since and before. You know, I mean, it's really bad, I think.
Well, there's a couple of parallels. One is that at the moment, children are basically being experimented on with puberty blockers.
My God, I mean that is highly offensive. Actually, this program, before he goes on, I'm going to give people a trigger warning because he is actually trying to liken affirmative transgender healthcare for trans children to experimentation of children by the Nazis in the death camps like Auschwitz and all, you know, during World War II. It's really awful. He hasn't apologized for it. The head of the Holocaust Memorial Trust spoke out against what Linehan had said here and said that he was trivialising the Holocaust, which he is. So yeah, but I will let I will kind of let you hear what he has to say, and you can make your own decision about that. But to me, as a Jewish trans person, I find this a dreadful trivialization of the Holocaust, and also it's actually kind of like attacks one of the groups that were victims of the Third Reich, which are trans people. And I mean, and we know this from, like, it's historically well known. I mean, it doesn't need to be kind of proven, inverted commas, that trans people were victims of the Nazis during the death camps. It's right from the start, trans people were victims of the Nazis. You get the Magnus Hirschfeld's clinic was ransacked in, I think it was 1933, when the Nazis came to power. There's photographs of them ransacking Hirschfeld's clinic and smashing up a sort of statue of him and burning all the research materials there. It's rumored to be that one trans woman, Dora Richter, who actually worked at the institute, she disappeared after the attack, and it's theorized that she was actually murdered by the Nazis when they attacked Hirschfeld's clinic. Hitler hated Hirschfeld for several reasons. Obviously, Hirschfeld was Jewish, so Hitler actually called Hirschfeld the most dangerous Jew in Germany. And Hitler because Hirschfeld was also gay and obviously standing up for trans rights as well, that, you know, the Nazis, Hirschfeld and like the thriving transgender culture that was in 1920s Berlin in particular, before the Nazis came to power, that was anathema to the Nazis. In fact, cis people who didn't gender conform, like Marlene Dietrich, for instance, wearing men's suits. She was quite famous for kind of like dressing, you know, in like a man's suit sometimes, and she was actually vilified by the Nazis as well. And obviously she was gay, or I mean, she's bi, I don't know, but she actually went, you know, when the Nazis came to power, as a lot of people know, she actually went to America and had a career in Hollywood after that. But she was absolutely kind of vilified by the Nazis, called a traitor, etc., and sort of like set up as an example of what a German woman shouldn't be. So yeah, as I said, I kind of got on the soapbox a bit here before he's even spoken, but yeah, those are my feelings on this. And anyway, let's see what you think.
For instance,
come on, you're not seriously trying to say that children going to the doctor and saying that they're worried about their gender is akin to children being experimented on in Nazi concentration camps?
I'm afraid I am, because Lupron, which is a drug that's supposed to be meant for end-stage cancer prostate cancer treatment, is being given to young girls. It has never been tested on girls. It has never been tested on women. That's happening to young women at the moment.
There's a couple of issues here. One of them is that these are doctors who are doing this, and you don't have any medical training to know about this, but the other is that they are doing it by choice. It is deeply offensive to compare this to Nazi concentration camps.
Oh, no, don't get me wrong, I'm not.
I'd like to add it's doubly offensive for somebody like me who's both Jewish and trans, for somebody like Graham Linehan, a transphobic cishet male, to say stuff like this, you know? I mean, obviously, he's got a right to his opinion. I mean, but to my mind, this kind of borders on Holocaust revisionism, and it's horrible. And I mean, Holocaust revisionism in the UK is not illegal. I mean, if David Irvine appeared on Newsnight, that wouldn't be illegal. But I mean, he would have to expect a lot of people, and Newsnight would have to expect a lot of people objecting and complaining about this, and so too with Graham Linehan. He's at the very least trivialising the Holocaust here. And also, you know, this is deeply insulting to all the victims of the Nazis, including trans people, and, you know, and Jewish trans people like me, Jewish trans allies like Magnus Hirschfeld. This is very, very insulting, and as I said, it's desecrating the memory of all the children who were abused and experimented on and murdered and maimed by the Nazis. It's just horrible stuff.
Comparing it to Nazi concentration camps. That's and also
that's basically what you said, was that experimenting.
He's trying to backpedal out of it now, but that is what he said, you know. Yeah.
And children is what the Nazis did and what doctors are doing today.
Well, essentially, if you look at the Tavistock, 35 psychologists have quit the Tavistock in 3 years. Does that sound...
That's one of the centres which deals specifically...
There's probably a lot of staff, what's the word? A lot of staff kind of people leaving, and I can't remember what the word is, but a lot of staff turnover at the Tavistock because a lot of them are consultants. So consultants tend to only stay a few years in a place and go afterwards, as far as I know, and like go on to work at different sort of institutes and like organisations. So yeah, this is another kind of regular sort of transphobic lie, you know, or lie by the transphobes that transgender healthcare is kind of like people within transgender healthcare are afraid to speak out, you know, and the idea that kids who are actually gay or like effeminate sort of cisgender people, or I should say feminine cisgender people, because I'm not sure if effeminate is an insulting term now or not, offensive term, or kind of masculine girls. They're always trying to push this idea that there's no such thing as a transgender child, which is a load of baloney, really, because I mean, I knew I was trans at the age of 3, and I didn't know what it was called, but I knew I was trans, and you know, heck, the other kids in school knew I was trans as well from the amount of bullying I got. So, yeah.
With people who think that they want to change their gender.
Yes, that's 35 over 3 years. Do you think that sounds like a healthy environment for children?
I've no idea what the reason why people might be leaving are, but I know children being able to come forward and talk about issues that they feel, it's entirely up to them whether or not they want to do that. Nobody's forcing anybody into anything.
I'm sorry, you don't tell children that they were...
Yeah, this is the main kind of thing about what Linehan is saying here in his comparison to transgender medical care as with the Holocaust. I mean, those children who were experimented on in the Holocaust, they were forced. These were forced medical experiments. They didn't sort of volunteer. They were forced, and this is what Graham Linehan can't seem to get into his head, or either that, or is deliberately kind of masking the fact that children during the Holocaust were forced into forced labour, were experimented on, were abused, were raped, were murdered. They were forced. They did not volunteer for that. They did not ask to be torn away from their parents and actually abused in such a way and maimed and murdered. They didn't ask for that, and for him to even kind of like intimate that is absolutely very, very offensive to a whole range of people, to everybody, really, to humanity. I mean, like, this just shows the level of obsession that this guy has about trans people and how much he actually hates us, yeah.
Born in the wrong body, because they're children and they will believe you. That's the I've seen kids, there are reports from the Tavistock that children as young as 4 were brought in. These are children, children are still believing in Santa.
For the record, I knew I was trans at the age of 3, and I'm not the only person who knew they were trans at the age of 3 from a lot of trans people I've spoken to, so just so you know.
When they're 10, it's ridiculous, it's absurd, and what surprises me.
Why do you think? What evidence do you have that young children are being told they are born into the wrong body? Just because we're having a debate about self-identification doesn't mean that young children who still believe in Santa are being told that they have to change their gender. That's ridiculous exaggeration.
No, that's not true. Well, one of the other things that Tavistock whistleblowers reported was that homophobic parents were bringing in their gender non-conforming kids and telling them to fix them. There was a dark joke.
Yeah, you see, this is another sort of conspiracy theory that's kind of wheeled out by the transphobic lobby, is that kids who would grow up to be kind of feminine men or masculine women are actually being kind of forced to be trans by transphobic parents and by homophobic parents and a homophobic society. Now, I do know that in Iran, gay people have been persuaded or forced to have gender reassignment. So some gay people have been forced into that, but that's in Iran. I mean, in this country, a homophobic parent is most likely to be transphobic as well. I mean, they're not going to say, oh, you change to a different gender so that that will make everything, inverted commas, normal. I'll make you heterosexual then. And it also presumes that every trans woman is going to be sexually attracted to men, and every trans man is going to be sexually attracted to women, because that's not the case. Sexuality and gender are separate, and again, Graham Linehan can't seem to get this into his head, or rather, he is deliberately ignoring this. He knows it very well. But in order to push these transphobic conspiracy theories, he needs to ignore that fact that trans people's sexualities are separate from our actual gender identity. And in fact, everybody's sexuality and gender identity is different. Is different from their, it's not the same thing. So, yeah.
Joke that went around the Tavistock where they said that in a couple of years there'll be no gay people left. Now that's why I compare it to eugenics programs and things like that. It is extremely.
again, I mean, like he's kind of like backpedaled a bit here, or he thinks he's backpedaled by saying, oh, eugenics. I wasn't comparing it to the concentration camps, but actually, eugenics and concentration camps are the same kind of thing, because like eugenics was what actually started off all this kind of, a lot of this inverted commas scientific racism, the kind of it all started off like in the sort of mid-Victorian times, the 1890s, when there were all kinds of theories about like race and stuff like that, and obviously like because the sort of white kind of Anglo-Saxon race was kind of sort of in charge in those days. It was it was them who kind of said, we're like superior to all the other races, and so eugenics is a part of it. Eugenics is a part of the Holocaust, I mean, the people doing this to children, experimenting them on, were doing it because they thought that people like, Jewish people, Slavic peoples, LGBT people, even they were kind of like racially or, in LGBT people's case, in some other way kind of inferior or I hate to use the word, but this is the word they use, and it's also a word that transphobes also use about trans people to this day, inverted commas, degenerate. So they actually thought that people like me, particularly people like me, because I'm Jewish and trans, kind of like inferior and degenerate and pollute society by our very existence. And we see these ideas kind of, still carried on in the sort of like far right, and eugenics programs. I mean, Sweden had a eugenics program I believe in the 30s and 40s, possibly the 50s, where they kind of picked on Roma children as well. Obviously, Roma children and Roma people were persecuted during the Holocaust as well and experimented upon. This is deeply insulting what Linehan is saying, not only to trans people, but to a wide variety of people. In fact, to most reasonable people, I mean, there is a difference between a child saying that they feel like they're in the wrong body, or they feel like they might be trans, and having that sort of healthcare there to find out. In most cases, this kind of healthcare is there to actually diagnose whether a child is trans, because let's remember that children can't have children can only like start to have hormones over the age of 18. You have to be over 18 to have hormones in the UK, to be prescribed hormones. And what children will get are puberty blockers once puberty hits, but those are reversible. So, but yeah, this is what they're like. This is what the transphobic lobby are like. They are literally obsessed, and they will tell any old lie to actually, try and kind of scaremonger people into supporting the curtailing of transgender medical healthcare and transgender rights. They will literally do anything,
Serious. And all I'm asking for is that people like me and the women that I support are not attacked. Their meetings aren't protested. They aren't abused on Twitter. I've been sued.
Yeah, okay.
I've been reported to the police.
I know you have.
My wife's address has been published online.
And
all these things have happened because I'm trying.
It's actually trans people who are being abused and defamed on Twitter by transphobes. It's the other way around. And people will protest what he said. People will get up, with placards, because what he's saying is offensive. If people go around saying that, trivializing the Holocaust and saying that, making a comparison between like innocent trans people and Nazis, when like trans people were among the victims of the Nazis, people are going to turn around, and say, no, that's not true. And I'm going to speak out against it, and it makes me feel uncomfortable. And I'm going to come out and support my trans colleagues and my trans friends and my trans, my kind of like Jewish friends and like, do you know what I mean? It's just really, you can't expect it. If you're going to mouth off controversial opinions, it's not illegal what you're doing, but it is actually illegal to bully other people because they're trans, or because they're Jewish, or because they're Polish, or Roma, or gay, or do you know what I mean? It's just like he can't get into his head. You say offensive things, say them, and nobody's stopping you. But expect people to be offended, and expect people to voice their kind of like displeasure at what you're saying, and to attempt to refute you, and to attempt to expose you when you're trying to push stuff that's not true onto people. I mean, people will always do that. You've got your right to freedom of speech, and so have the women and men that you say haven't. You talk as if like women are not allowed to speak about this, but plenty of women are gender critical activists. But what you guys have done, what you gender critical males, or so-called gender critical males, have done, you've jumped on the bandwagon. So back in when you were sort of like right in the IT crowd, you thought you could make a sort of like a light of trans women being beaten up. You thought that was okay, and when you were told that was actually quite offensive, instead of admitting that instead of admitting that was offensive and apologizing, you just went off on a rant and just decided to just start attacking trans people. Yeah.
To make
and
the
comparing the
conversation
trans debate
less toxic.
Right, talking about eugenics and comparing trans activists to Nazis is not going to make this debate less toxic. What you're doing is fanning the flames. You're throwing
trans
fuel
activists
on this.
Threaten the feminists I support with rape and death threats. Okay, so the idea.
Receipts, please. There may have been one or two trans people, who've said that, but like in every other community, there's always good, bad, and indifferent. Is people who say things. I mean, I've had loads of like death threats and rape threats from TERFs and transphobes. I mean, I've been sexually harassed all the time on the internet. I just kind of, both for being female and both for being trans. Because people tend to think you can say to trans women what they wouldn't dare say to a cis woman. They seem to think that somehow it's not real, and that we're public, we're not kind of like, if they kind of like sexually harass us, it's not really an offense type of thing. There are some people with that mentality. There are some people with the mentality of if they can sort of treat us like we're public property, and like they'll ask us when's the surgery, which is like another way of asking what's in our knickers, so yeah.
Idea that there's an equivalence between these two. I am absolutely happy to step out of this conversation completely once women like Kathleen Stock and Jane Clare Jones are allowed to speak.
Quite a lot of women think that they can speak for themselves, thank you, and they don't necessarily need Graham Linehan to come in and talk for us.
Well, the women I support value my support and are glad that I'm amplifying their voices.
And amplify.
Yeah, we've only got his word for that.
Find the toxicity of a debate when you come in here and use this kind of inflammatory language.
These women are not toxic. These women are.
I'm not saying they are. I'm saying it's your comparisons tonight that are pretty toxic, coming in here and talking about Nazis. If you want to have a reasonable debate about what's going on with gender identity in this country, we can't talk about Nazis in the same breath.
The thing about the Nazi comment was what I was trying to get across was that this is a hinge moment in history, just like during the Nazis. And we always ask ourselves the same questions. We ask ourselves, what would I have done? Would I have bowed down? Would I have done everything I was told to do? Or would I have resisted? Would I have stood up, and would I have stood up alongside people who were trying to do the right thing? That's what I'm trying to do at the moment.
Oh my God. He is actually comparing himself here to the people who resisted the Nazis during World War II. The people like the White Rose movement, people who tried to assassinate Hitler, the people who in the French resistance, and like the partisans who fought the Nazis. That's horrendous. That's an absolute insult to people who stood up to the Nazis during the Third Reich and during World War II. And have stood up to them since and lost their lives. That is an absolute insult to people who stand up to racism, and have paid for it dearly by, through for being murdered or maimed, or that just, words cannot explain how that makes me feel. That is arrogance. That there you see is cis privileged male arrogance of this man. It's just breathtaking, absolutely breathtaking.
And it's being made very, very difficult. Look, 2 years ago, we wrote to Stonewall, way before I compared trans rights activists to Nazis. And we said, could we please bring down the toxicity of this conversation? Could we please just look at some of these issues, some of these points where women's rights conflict with trans rights, and just talk about it? And within the day...
Women's rights conflicting with trans rights. So there again, you see his complete denial that trans women are also women. So he automatically kind of like talks as if trans women aren't women by excluding them from women's rights, excluding us from having rights like other women. Yeah.
Stonewall said no. They said absolutely not.
So they said to us today, we invited them to come on the programme, and instead they gave us a statement saying trans people in Britain face huge levels of abuse in all areas of their life. They quote statistics showing that hate crimes against trans people have increased 37% in the last year, and say they're proud of their work towards trans equality.
Yes, but the reason hate crimes have increased is because everything is now transphobic, including saying
again, blaming trans people for their hate crimes committed against us, Maybe don't hate crime against us, How difficult is that? How difficult is it for somebody to not be transphobic? How difficult is it for somebody not to, shout abuse at us in the street? How difficult is it for somebody to not beat us up or to spit at us or to... Do you know what I mean? How difficult is that? Just don't do it. It's like blaming women for rape. Just don't rape women. Just don't do it.
Statements like men aren't women. These are considered transphobic statements. So the reason that these hate crime figures are going up is because the bar has been set so low for what is and isn't transphobic. There has to be a...
This guy, in an episode of the IT Crowd, he showed a trans woman being beaten up, right? I mean, she got the better of the guy who was beating her up. But the plot was that one of the guys in the IT Crowd finds out that the woman that he's dating is a trans woman. And then there's a fight and the man kind of punches her and everything, And so this is the kind of is this what the acceptable level of transphobia that Graham Linehan sees? Do you know what I mean? Is that the acceptable? Is beating us up, acceptable? For being trans? Is that what he sees? See this kind of old way of thinking of trans people are not legitimate. There's still that kind of way of thinking with a lot of these people. They haven't moved on. He probably kind of as he was kind of growing up. I mean, perhaps he hasn't grown up. I get the feeling he hasn't grown up. But not to insult children, because I think that there's no excuse for this really. He's still in that mindset where, what, trans people having rights? That's outrageous. Trans people having equal rights? Absolutely outrageous. That's the kind of mentality that he hasn't shaken off yet. And he's not prepared to learn. He's not prepared to grow. He's just kind of doubled down on hating a minority group and blaming the minority group for the fact that really he's become obsessed and paranoid and he can't work anymore. I don't know. I haven't seen any kind of output from him for years, to be honest, with regard to scripts and writing. There's been nothing, and I'm sure he will blame the trans community for that in the same way that Adolf Hitler would have blamed the Jewish community for him not becoming a artist, again, yeah, but what can you do?
Conversation about this. It is absolutely crucial. Children...
Okay. Well, that's all the time we have for this conversation tonight. I'm fairly confident it will continue on social media.
I'm sure it will.
Graham Linehan, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Well, Graham Linehan is with me now. You wrote a piece.
So yeah, that was difficult to watch, but as I say, this is like trivializing the Holocaust, and it's just thoroughly insulting to me on a number of levels, and I suspect to most of you, the viewer, as well. And please do tell me what you think about this. Tell me how you feel about all of this, because I mean, I would imagine that watching this will elicit very strong opinions from a number of people for all a variety of different reasons. Yeah, and thank you very much for watching and for hearing my thoughts on this. And please, as I say, if you have any opinions on this or any feedback, please do kind of leave them below. If you would like to subscribe to my channel, I would be very grateful. Thank you. And thank you for watching, and thank you for everybody who subscribes to my channel already. I do appreciate you subscribing and watching my videos. And in the meantime, before my next video, I send you all lots of love. So stay safe, folks, and don't let transphobes like this get you down. So yeah, cheerio. Bye.